I'm not sure when it began. Maybe it was one morning when I woke up and felt no interest in anything, or one of those late nights lying in the dark when I suddenly knew I didn't want to go on, yet had no reason to stop. It wasn't obvious sadness, nor clinical depression. It was a deep weariness, as if something inside me had been traveling far, far away for a long time, and now only a thin, quiet breath and an emptiness remained. I tried to find an explanation for that feeling. I studied and read a lot. I threw myself into existential philosophy, chewed over both Eastern and Western thought, sank into systems of teaching that people call profound. I read about non-self, about emptiness, about the pure ground of being. I thought if I understood deeply enough, if I grasped the theory fully, I would escape that vague ache inside. I imagined there was a final door open it, and everything would be liberated. But the more I understood, the more confused I became. I began to carry grand concepts in my head, and of course, I started imposing them on myself. I wondered, who is the one doing the thinking? Am I clinging to these concepts? Is this a delusion, or is it genuine insight? These questions didn't calm me. Instead, they put me into a continuous state of self-observation and self-doubt, as if another self had formed subtler, more secretive, hiding beneath the garb of a devoted practicer. I grew tired of my own practice, not from laziness, but because something felt false. I didn't dare tell anyone, because around me people were moving strongly along their paths. They seemed so sure, but inside I knew I was playing a game I'd already lost from the start. I wasn't seeking truth anymore. I was chasing a more beautiful version of the old self. And then, at some point, I couldn't go on, not because I'd reached a destination, but because I had no motivation left to keep pretending. I had traveled far and tried many routes, yet in the moment I let go of everything I thought was right, everything I had tried to preserve, I suddenly stood still. No goal, no identity. No expectations, no sense of failure, only a silence that was very real, nameless, colorless, flavorless, and yet distinctly present. In that space, I remembered very clearly the first times in meditation when my mind settled in a strange, deep way, not the hazy quiet I'd had before, but a bright, very clear stillness. No inner voice, no fragments of thought running around, only a stillness like the face of water at dawn. I sat there, as if I needed nothing anymore. At that time, I truly believed I had stepped through another door. I thought perhaps I'd had a sudden awakening. After that meditation, I carried a peculiar feeling, not the usual pride, but a subtle inner self-regard. I moved more lightly, spoke less, looked at things as if I had seen through the veil of appearances. I didn't say it out loud, but inside, I had placed myself in the role of someone awakened, as if I were a being different from the crowd lost in illusion. I began to write these impressions in my notebook. I used words like emptiness, void, absolute peace, yes, yes, and then I returned to seek that state many times. I timed my meditation exactly like before, adjusted breath, posture, the space around me, all hoping that that same quiet, like a still pond, would come back. But the harder I tried, the further it seemed to drift away. Meditation became a silent chase, a subtle journey to recreate a feeling I had once had, like an addict trying to find the first high again. I didn't notice that I was no longer meditating to let go. I was meditating to attain. That wanting to attain wasn't labeled material, but it was still craving for a special feeling, craving to be different, craving for a sign that I was on the right path. I no longer walked for the simplicity of the present. I walked to affirm a position, a value, even under the guise of non-self. The effort to maintain a calm mind trapped me in a loop. When the mind wandered, I felt disappointed. When it settled, I tried to keep it. When I couldn't keep it, doubt arose. When doubt arose, I meditated to correct it. I went round and round on a kind of secret spiritual highway. But it became heavy. I even began to enjoy talking about my experiences, not to brag crudely, but to share in a way that secretly sought recognition. I used profound words, metaphors about emptiness, about essence, about non-self. Yet deep down, I still wanted someone to exclaim, "You've seen it." I still needed a witness for something I hadn't truly confirmed in quiet. I remained a self, only this time I was a self that claimed to be awakened. After a while, I couldn't bear it, not because I thought I was wrong, but because I was exhausted from maintaining a version of myself that was supposed to have passed beyond delusion. I feared I was stuck. I feared others would surpass me. Then I realized I didn't actually want to let go. I wanted achievement. That achievement wasn't clarity. It was a new kind of status, a more skillful mask, a higher grade ego. Only then did I see clearly that all special states are traps. Every effort to reach an absolute calm was actually pushing me away from what was quietly present. Truth does not lie in the special feeling, not in a deep meditative state. From that point, I no longer meditated to attain. I no longer treated a peaceful state as a good sign, nor a distracting thought as an obstacle. I simply sat, simply breathed, simply noticed. If there was noticing, fine. If not, fine as well. I began to live with the truth without needing a guide. The truth itself no longer needed my confirmation. No bell rang. No flash of light appeared. No shiver ran down my spine. That moment happened on a very ordinary morning. You could even say it was boring. I sat behind the house with a cup of tea gone cold. There was nothing in my head, nothing that required me to act. The sky and clouds were gentle. The familiar hum of traffic outside, a few lonely birds. Everything was so everyday. I wasn't trying to be good, nor was I attempting to awaken. I simply sat there without reaching for anything, not seeking, not thinking, not wanting to understand more. No desire. No, I am practicing. No, I am mindful. No, self at all. And then, very naturally, without anyone guiding me, everything was whole in a strangely complete way. Sounds didn't reverberate in my ears so much as pass through an empty space. Light didn't strike my eyes so much as soak into the space. Things continued to operate, but there was no center to point back to. No one was seeing, nothing was being seen. There was no one in between to gather these into an experience. And in that no one moment, everything became luminously clear without needing light. I can't say I saw non-self, because if I saw it, then someone would be seeing. Precisely because there was no one seeing, everything appeared as it is complete, without needing analysis, without names, without essences, no dharmas, no self, no non-self, no awakening, no ignorance, just presence. What made me recognize that moment as real was not that it was special, but that it couldn't be repeated. The instant I tried to hold it, the moment I thought, "This is precious," it vanished. The mind rose to embrace it, and everything blurred. From a transparent ground, I returned to concepts, memories, and familiar structures of intellect. I understood that it wasn't a state, not something I attained. It only appears when no one is seeking, when no one is imposing, when no one is analyzing. Afterward, I stopped trying to recreate it, because I knew that the very act of trying already removed me from that moment. It is not something to find again by schedule, method, or technique. It is the moment when everything is returned to its naturalness, when the mind stops explaining life, stops placing itself at the center, stops wanting to become anything other than what already island. And I also understood that non-self was never hidden. It's always there, the inexhaustible background of every phenomenon. We simply never see it, because we are always busy naming what appears on that background. When no one is left to name, when no one wants to understand, to seize, to hold, that background reveals itself like a mirror without dust, without glitter, without color, and nothing can cover it. After that moment, nothing in my outward life changed in the way people usually expect. I didn't become a new person. I didn't turn into someone permanently silent or always awake. I still live my life. I still eat and sleep normally. I still get irritated with loved ones sometimes. I still forget myself in the daily work. But something changed very quietly, not shown on the outside, a knowing that sits behind every motion of the mind. My mind is still restless. Waves of distracting thoughts still arise. There are times I react from ignorance. But instead of being completely swept away as before, I feel as if I'm sitting somewhere steady and clear, watching things happen without the immediate urge to fix them. That knowing does not try, does not impose, does not interfere. It does not attempt to control or extinguish anything. It simply knows, and that knowing is wide enough to hold both turmoil and stillness. I no longer try to hold on to the states I once touched, because I know that those so-called states are phenomena. They come and they go, and any effort to keep them is only another form of clinging. Only when I stop trying to preserve a calm mind does real calmness truly appear. This calmness doesn't come from stopping thoughts. It comes from there being no one left who opposes the thoughts. I see that truth does not need to be maintained. It does not depend on whether you are thinking or not, whether you are still or moving. It is not an arriving and leaving experience, but is always there as a background. Because it is always there, this knowing is not hurt by the motions of consciousness. The mind can rise in any way, yet the background remains clear and untouched. Then I began to understand clearly what it means to live normally, not to be perpetually enlightened or awake, but to stop fabricating more personas. There is no need to carry the ideal of liberation as a duty. No need to assert that I am living mindfully. I simply live as ordinary people live. The difference is that beneath that living, there is clarity. A clarity that does not need to be spoken. I don't try to behave like someone who has seen. There is no urge to teach, to transmit, to prove anything. Sometimes I even forget what I have experienced. Yet the silence remains, as if there is a space inside me that can never be filled by emotion, memory, or wandering thought. Not because I am special, but because everything has been returned to its right place, naturally. Not forced, not made into art. This verse does not arise as a crafted work. I did not sit down to compose, nor did I polish each line like a poet. It came like a gentle breath, after a long season of no longer wanting to speak, not because there is nothing left to say, but because I have seen that the most important things are not in words. When I wrote the first line, I had no preformed idea in my head. I only felt myself letting go not just of coarse thoughts, but of the subtle concepts I had once clung to as truth. Each word appeared not to express, but as if it fell itself out of an inner silence. Every verse did not come from deliberate mind, but from a place very far, and yet very near a place without a name. No word of object, no detachment from condition, neither coming nor going, neither movement nor still. When thought arises, it is emptiness. Emptiness does not perish. Where would the true heart have a place to rest? I once thought that to see the true mind, I had to cut off every wandering thought, stop every movement, and become completely still. But after everything, I realized that even as thoughts arise, emptiness can still be seen not by destroying them, but by no longer moving along with them. My mind, once exhausted from striving to be quiet, now simply lets things come and go without holding, without pushing. And I began to see something simple. Nothing can remain, and so nothing is ever truly lost. Dharma is never born, not even a speck. Mind has no form, nothing to grasp. All things are only names provisionally given. Drop the names, drop the ideas, and the true mind is seen. I had once suffered in my search for the true teaching. I read, I studied, I collected doctrines. I tried to define emptiness, essence, nirvana. But when the mind stopped needing, I saw that all of it was just concepts, layered over what had never left me, not for a single moment. Then one day, I suddenly realized, the very act of hearing, if not called I am hearing, was already enough. The true mind does not need to be proven, nor does it need any form. It has nowhere to go, so it never needs to return. Not seeing like a person seeing an object, but open, without covering or thought. The moment you seek, it's already lost. Write in no thought, that is knowing. This was the part I hesitated most to write, because I knew, if you read it with a mind that wants to understand, you will miss it. What's spoken of here is not observation of subject and object. It's not, I see my thoughts clearly, nor, I am having insight. It is a knowing where no one is knowing, a clarity not born of effort. Only when the mind stops seeking, stops intending to attain, does that vision reveal itself. Not because we achieved it, but because we no longer covered it. I finished that verse in a very deep silence. There was no feeling of accomplishment, no sense that I had said something grand. I just sat for a long time afterward, not thinking, without emotion. Like the earth still warm after a long rain, like air still soft and damp. I knew some who read this verse, seeking to understand, would find it abstract. Those who hoped for an answer might feel disappointed. But if you don't need to understand, if you simply read it as a release, as a permission for everything not to be defined, then perhaps, between the lines, you might touch a silence. Not the silence of words, but your own silence. And if that happens, then the verse has already completed its task. Not to teach, but to fall from the mind like a light leaf, enough to remind you that nothing more is needed. What is already here is enough. I don't think of myself as enlightened, nor do I need to affirm it. Because the deeper I go into truth, the clearer it becomes. There is no one to be enlightened, and no fixed state of enlightenment to be reached. All the images I once built of someone awakened, pure, unmoved, were only imagination. A form of idealization, born from a mind still craving to become. Truth, if we may call it that, does not need anyone's confirmation. It does not become more true when someone realizes it, nor less true when someone doesn't. It doesn't depend on the seeker. It doesn't belong to the finder. It is not inside anyone, and it is not absent anywhere. That is why when someone asks me, "Have you awakened yet?" I no longer know how to answer. If I say yes, I've unknowingly built a new identity. If I say no, I've created an image of someone still lacking. In both cases, a self is hiding behind the words. I no longer care where I am on the path, not because I don't value the journey, but because I know. Comparisons of near and far, progress and regression, higher and lower, only exist when there is an ego watching. But when there is no watcher, everything is simply movement, without a self, like leaves falling, like clouds drifting. No need for progress, no need to become, no need to be perfect, only to be present, without interfering. And the strange thing is, there was a moment when I stopped wanting to find the truth. And strangely, that was when the truth began to reveal itself. Not as a final answer, but as an open space where every question dissolved. It wasn't because I discovered something new. It was because there was nothing left to search for. No question left to force the world to answer. And in that absence, in that emptiness, I began to sense nothing is missing. I'm not sharing this to teach you a path. I can't. And if you're expecting something clear to hold on to, then perhaps you'll be disappointed. But if you are at a place where every piece of advice already feels unnecessary, where every theory has run dry, where every effort of the spirit no longer brings meaning, then maybe, in that exhaustion, you'll begin to hear something very quiet. I don't end with a lesson. I don't want to leave behind an impression. If anything still lingers in you, after hearing all of this, it is not the content, not the point of view, but a gentle emptiness, a soft silence, a quiet space where nothing more needs to be understood. And if you're sitting there now, not trying, not expecting, not searching, then maybe you are closer to what I cannot put into words. We'll still be here, not as a teacher, not as a shelter, but as an open space you can return to any time, a space that belongs to no one. And when that happens, perhaps you'll see most clearly. This is the moment you are most truly present. So I wish you this: enough stillness to hear the silence within yourself, enough light so you no longer need to borrow light from outside, and enough freedom to let go of everything false you once thought you were.